What happens now? You had Putin in Alaska on Friday with President Trump. You had Zelenskyy with President Trump in Washington today. You had all NATO leaders in Washington as well. Is it going to be a truce, a peace deal, a ceasefire, a victory? I don't know. I do know who does know. Victoria Coates, the former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Trump in the first term. She's going to break down historically what's going on in this entire deal. Plus, later, Kay Hill, who grew up in the UK, on what's happening on the European side. This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Make sure you subscribe.
He is doing his best to bring an end to this war. This is the first progress we've had in 6.5 years. It's rich to have Emmanuel Macron sitting there, running the second largest economy in the EU at this point, who's literally made no progress on ending this war for 3.5 years. That was such a genius stroke historically to pick Alaska. Of course, the Russians had to sell it to us in the 19th century because they had accrued such massive war debts during the failed Crimean War against France and Great Britain. They had to sell bits of themselves off. And so what happened when they did that? They missed the gold rush. They missed the discovery of oil. They missed the discovery that Alaska is a perfect place to fire off polar orbit satellites. We can offer a sort of version of Article 5. They're not going to become a member of NATO. That president's been very clear on this.
Well, that would cause World War III, wouldn't it? If we let them in?
Well, it could. It could.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
So what happens now? Zelenskyy shows up. At one point, he's got a T-shirt on. Then he puts a jacket on, which is actually better than he did last time. But forgetting about his fashion, what exactly is going on? I mean, I'd like to know, and the person who I think knows is Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Trump. How are you, Victoria? Good to see you.
It's great to be with you, Joe.
I'm confused, and that's why I wanted you on. You always help to unconfuse me. I know that Trump meeting with Putin was, I think, a massive success, although the left wants us to think that Putin somehow bugged his car. Susan Rice literally said he might have bugged his car. Why let him in the car? So I thought it was a massive success. I thought it was a great power play by the president, just how he received him. The B-2 flying overhead was amazing, and Putin basically said this war didn't have to start if the Biden administration would have talked to me. And we do want to get to a resolution. Now, I don't take Putin as far as I can throw him. I get that. But I thought progress was made. And then Europe definitely jumped into action. And then Zelensky's here and the European leaders are all here. Let's go to their meeting in Alaska, if you don't mind. Let's start with that. When Putin says, Trump's right, I wouldn't have done this had he been in office. When he says, I tried to talk to the previous administration. Victoria, do you know what the previous administration needed to say to him to stop him from rolling into Ukraine?
Oh, I think so. I think what the Biden administration should have said to him in January of 2022 was, hey, guess what we're going to do? We're going to slap those sanctions back on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that had expired. President Trump had put them on during the first term. Senator Cruz, your great senator, was lobbying very heavily to get a vote. If you remember, he held up all of Joe Biden's diplomatic nominees, and everybody was yelling and screaming about how the president deserved to have his nominees. They're not yelling and screaming about that now, but they were yelling about it in the fall of 21 and winter of 22. So they were, the point that President Trump and Senator Cruz had made is that Nord Stream 2 is basically massive leverage for Putin over Europe. And so if we cut that off, if we sort of stab a stake through that thing, then that will liberate Europe and prevent Putin from having a revenue stream. And President Biden went up to the Hill personally, which was a big deal for him. He didn't do it very often. And he personally lobbied the Democrats to vote against the sanctions. He was Putin's lobbyist. And I think Putin saw that and rightly thought they are not serious about this. I can do whatever I want. Europe needs me more than I need Europe. And he rolled in 6 weeks later.
It is Victoria Coates. Great information. I also know that Biden, unbeknownst to him, signed an executive order stopping the terminals in Louisiana that were to send the LNG over to the EU. President Trump, in his first term, as you know very well, sat down and said, I'm not going to protect you from him if you're buying energy from him. You buy it from me. And Europe said, all right, damn it, we'll do that. And the deal was made. Biden literally shut off the terminals. And when Mike Johnson, who's the representative from that area, said, why did you shut off the terminals? Biden said, I didn't. And Johnson said, yes, you did. And Biden said, no, I signed an executive order about doing a study. Well, in the executive order, it says right here, you shut off the terminals. And that also enriched and empowered Russia, didn't it?
It did. And so you first of all have the export terminals in Louisiana. I always also would like one in my home state of Pennsylvania on
Yes.
the Atlantic. I think that would be very helpful for everybody. So you do that. Then you also had, in the same set of actions, the export license freeze or halt that the president also couldn't remember doing subsequently. But the country that most directly impacted was India, because the countries with whom we have a free trade agreement, like the EU, were exempt from that.
Right.
We don't have a free trade agreement with India. So what has India done over these courses of the 3.5 years of the war? They've gone from importing single digits, like 5% of their energy to Russia, to over 40% while
wow.
the war was going on. Yeah. And 2 million barrels a day last month. And the Biden administration encouraged them to do that. It's in the press that when Modi came, I guess in the summer of 23, and he said to Biden, "I want more exports," and Biden said, "No, we're gonna put a ban on those exports. We're not going to export anymore. So you just keep buying the dirty Russian product," and that's what he's done. And now the administration is rightly upset about this. But I think the path with India is to work with them, figure out how to get those contracts back online with U.S. companies to get that product. If we need to, work with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait to increase their production to fill the Indian needs, but get them off that Russian gas.
Yeah, and that's so weird because now Trump is in the position to say, India, stop getting oil and gas and energy from Russia, and India is going, well, I had to because of what happened in the previous administration. So I'm not getting the relationship, and maybe I'm into conspiracy theories, and maybe you can tell me that I'm dumb. But when I watch Biden with Ukraine, he appeared to be owned by the oligarchs in Ukraine. In fact, Jamie Comer says that the Biden family got $5 million plus just from oligarchs in Ukraine. Why was he lobbying for the betterment of Russia, which sounds like he wanted Russia to do anything they wanted to do? Do we know why he would have gone easy on Russia when it appeared as though his allegiances were with Ukraine the entire time?
Well, I think we can see a number of different things here. For starters, yes, the Biden family has historically enriched itself off of Ukraine. I mean, this is why Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma, their
Right.
natural gas company, which made no sense. I remember where I literally where I was in the Senate when my assistant looked at me and said, "Hunter Biden's gone on the board of Burisma." I said, what on earth is happening? It just makes no sense. So on
Right.
the one hand, yes, the Biden corruption machine was running through Ukraine, but on the other hand, then he had all of the environmental radicals in his administration who were bound and determined to stop the export of United States fossil fuel energy. And they didn't.
Wow.
They also didn't want a domestic price crisis here, so they wanted those Russian molecules on the market. So they turned a blind eye to the Europeans continuing to import Russian energy, which they are still doing, by the way. Those folks sitting in that line outside the Oval Office, they're all buying Russian gas, except maybe the French, because I think they're all on nuke. But it's that has to end. And finally, you have President Trump taking a real hard line on that and saying, no, we can't fuel Putin's war machine.
And because of Putin's mindset, I would assume that Putin says, wow, not only can I do it, they're helping me do it. I'm going to roll into Ukraine. Who's going to stop me? And he was right. Nobody stopped him. I mean, is that sort of the mindset of a madman?
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to join the legions of folks in D.C. who've somehow psychoanalyzed Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's beyond my capabilities. So he's going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
But I think just from a raw power perspective, yes, he saw an opportunity. He's always wanted it. He thinks it's his. He rolled in. And he didn't have Donald Trump in the White House, and he knew there was going to be a weak response. And I think this is really important for the folks who are just suddenly hyperventilating that Donald Trump is going to hand Vladimir Putin Ukraine. Like, no, he has not. He hasn't done it in the first 6 months of his administration, 200 days plus. And he didn't do it on Friday, and he didn't do it today. He is doing his best to bring an end to this war. This is the first progress we've had in 6.5 years. It's rich to have Emmanuel Macron sitting there, running the second largest economy in the EU at this point, who's literally made no progress on ending this war for 3.5 years. So how about they listen to President Trump? How about they figure out what a good plan is, maybe the least worst plan, because I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to make everyone happy, but that gives Ukraine sovereignty, secure borders, and make sure the eastern front, rather, of NATO is also correspondingly secure.
It's Victoria Coates, Vice President of National Security Foreign Policy at Heritage. Go to heritage.org. Always appreciate the time and the access. See, here's what we're getting. The meeting wasn't long enough, so Putin won. The meeting was too long, so Putin won. Putin spoke first, so he won. Putin walked up to Trump, so he somehow won. I did a video on Thursday or Friday, and it's got over 3.5 million views on Instagram and TikTok, where I just showed the body language where obviously Trump was in charge. Obviously, Putin was the subordinate there. I mean, making him walk to him, shaking his hand, pulling him in, saying whatever he said. The B-2 flies over with some supporting aircraft. Obviously, Putin came, I think, to this country because Trump said, you come to me, I'm not coming to you. That's what I saw, but I'm a Trump guy. Is there any way to analyze what happened on Friday? Any other way than Trump got what he wanted, and he wasn't going to get peace that day. He knew that. He was setting the framework, setting the groundwork for the things that are happening today. And maybe you sit down with Zelenskyy and Putin together. I mean, is there any way to spin that other than that was a success for the president?
Well, of course they can spin it, and they're going to.
Yeah, but not reality. I mean, what's the reality of it? That's what I want to know.
It is divorced from reality. It's like what you're just saying with Valerie Jarrett, that somehow Putin has a bug in his pocket just in case the president invites him into the beast. It's just not realistic. And guess what? They'll scan the beast. We have the capability to do that. So it's madness. And so I had a piece in the Daily Mail on Friday as a historian about what Alaska means, why that was such a genius stroke historically to pick Alaska. Of course, the Russians had to sell it to us in the 19th century because they had accrued such massive war debts during the failed Crimean War against France and Great Britain. They had to sell bits of themselves off. And so what happened when they did that? They missed the gold rush. They missed the discovery of oil. They missed the discovery that Alaska is a perfect place to fire off polar orbit satellites. So we wound up with this incredible national treasure up there, which is now in many ways the backbone of the energy dominance that the United States has that makes us a rival with Russia on energy. We don't have to go to them like supplicants the way Joe Biden did. We can produce our own energy here at home in Pennsylvania, in Texas, two great states that go great together. And that is I think the message of Alaska. And that's why I think it was so smart to do it there.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be perfect. And again, it was a shorter meeting. Of course, you make Putin speak first because Daddy gets to speak last and say what he saw. Putin says the agreements that we made, and Trump says we didn't make any agreements. We have agreements when we have agreements, and we don't have agreements yet. We're getting there. We certainly have taken the right steps. And then, he didn't take any questions from the media. I got this one on Friday, too, from idiots. He didn't take any questions from the media. He was scared. The man takes questions every single day. I wish he'd stop taking so many questions. That's how many he takes. So he leaves, I believe, with the upper hand. And I think Putin looked as small as he is. I think he looked meek in the way he smiled and sort of cowered to Trump. But at the end of the day, if Putin still gets what he wanted in Ukraine, he still feels like he wins. So let's go there. What is it going to take for us to get out? Can we make him leave the eastern portion, those eastern Donbass that he's in now, that he's calling part of Russia, and the people there are ethnically Russian? Can we take that back from him, or is he going to get some land out of this?
I think he's probably going to get some land. I'm going to leave that to the negotiations. And as the president has said, that's really up to Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian people and whether they want peace more than they want some of those pieces of territory. I think the sticky thing Putin is asking for right now are some pieces of those eastern territories that he does not control. So that would be voluntarily ceding territory. That's a little bit harder to stomach, but he has shifted on this issue of a security guarantee that the United States and NATO would provide something like an Article 5 protection for Ukraine. And bear in mind, Joe, I mean, NATO is a purely defensive alliance. They've never gone on an offensive mission of any sort against Russia or anybody else. So, that defensive mechanism for Ukraine should be utterly unthreatening to Putin, and it just should be a signal to him that he can't go back in, and he certainly should not try to take a bite out of a NATO member.
Let me go back a little bit further to Obama. I know that George W. Bush set up the Patriot missiles and that the missile defense shield. I think it was in Ukraine. If not, it was in Poland. It was there to let Russia know we will take you. We will go nuts and bomb you out of the sky if you try something. And then Obama got rid of them. He said, let's just get rid of those. And he did. I mean, was that not a high sign to Putin that we're not going to defend anything on the Eastern Front? I mean, why not leave that there? What exactly did we gain by taking that away?
That's a really critical historical point. Is Obama in his first year, as he was getting his Nobel Peace Prize, literally cancels the missile defense batteries for Poland for Eastern Europe because Putin didn't like it, and he was trying to make friends with Putin, and he was trying to make friends with Iran, and he was trying to make friends with China.
How'd that work out?
Losers errand. No, it was just a disaster. But so I think Putin saw that and then said, well, I'm just going to take Crimea. It didn't work for me before, but I think it's mine, so I'm going to take it. And Obama literally did nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's when I think he started considering a larger campaign in Ukraine. He did do it under President Trump, who did also a huge amount to train and equip the Ukrainians during the first term. He's supposed to be a Russian puppet, but that was what he was actually doing, and that's what the material that helped the Ukrainians in the early days of the war and the training that helped them. So that's, there's sort of this counterfactual history that somehow the Democrats are tougher on Putin than the Republicans. That's just not true.
It appears, and you're so right about everything you did. I think he sent some sheets and some ready-to-eat meals. Right. I mean, maybe some helmets, and that's not what I thought the Budapest Memorandum was. Although that's not a treaty, we still are supposed to offer some security. And at the same time, Russia wasn't supposed to do what it did. So let's say that we come to some sort of an arrangement with Russia, and we say, and when you say Article 5 protections, does that mean actually allowing Ukraine in, or can we offer Article 5 without them being a member?
We could offer a sort of version of Article 5. They're not going to become a member of NATO. That president's been very clear on this.
Well, that would cause World War III, wouldn't it? If we let them in?
Well, it could. It could, but they also don't fill the criterion for membership. I mean, this is a practical thing. There are standards for NATO, and if you undermine those standards and just say you're going to throw in Ukraine, you need everybody to agree. And now 32 countries to agree. They're not going to do that. B, they need to not be corrupt. They are. That's just a fact. We can help them with that, but it's going to take years. And this is the same reason they're not in the EU. If the Europeans were so gung-ho on this, they could have let them into the EU 3 years ago. They didn't.
Right.
Why? Because their currency would tank the euro. That's just a fact. So there's no way Merz and van der Leyen and all those folks at the White House today are going to take a step like that. It's not practical. Now, that said, what Article 5 says is that if a member of NATO is attacked, all options are on the table, including military force. It does not require a military response, but it makes that possible. And so you could do something similar like that. You could say, the members of NATO, the group that was at the White House today, because they're the ones that really matter, are going to, sign something saying that, yes, we will prevent Putin from going in. And bear in mind, they're in a much more powerful position to do so now than they were 4 years ago, or even 6 months ago, because of the pledges that they made at The Hague at the NATO summit in April, that they were going to get not to 2%, which was all Joe Biden was nicely asking them to do, was get to 2. They're going to get to 5. And that they're starting to make those investments. The cash is on the barrelhead. Those things are being purchased. And one of the things they're purchasing is American equipment, which is great. That makes Europe so much stronger. NATO shouldn't be a crutch to Europe. It should be a shelter. It should be a umbrella over Europe, not something that they can just depend on and not pay their fair share. So that's the ultimate deterrent for Russia, because those economies represented in the Oval Office today are the biggest in the world. The EU and the US together don't just dwarf Russia, they dwarf China as an economy. And so there's very little we can't do if we are unified and have the same purpose.
It is Victoria Coates, a former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Trump. A couple of last ones, Victoria. What incredible information. I get the feeling, and this is why I have you on, because you're going to deal in fact and I'll deal in feelings. Not that I'm a liberal, but I get the feeling that Europe is confused about what it wants to do with this situation with Ukraine. It appears that some of them want to keep on fighting, keep on giving them the weapons. I'm glad that the EU or the NATO is now buying it from us, and now we're not just giving it. But it appears as though they just want it to continue. Let's just keep this going and push Russia out. Another part of Europe appears to be saying, enough is enough, let's end this thing. Am I getting the wrong feeling, or are you getting the same mixed messages from these leaders? Some seem to say Ukraine must win, which it's not going to. Others seem to say, let's end this thing now.
No, I think the ones who are saying Europe must win have sort of gotten trapped in their own rhetoric over the last 3 years, very much with the leadership of the Biden administration saying as much as it takes, as long as it takes, we're just going to get tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars now from the Congress, from the American people. We're going to keep pouring that into Ukraine with no strategy. We're not going to talk to the Russians under any circumstances. It would be dishonorable. And we're going to fight for every last inch of Ukraine. Well, everyone's on and on suddenly about their sovereign borders.
Right.
These are the people who've allowed unfettered immigration into Europe, which has changed the whole makeup of the continent. And at the same time, how many times since the founding of the United States 250 years ago have the borders of Europe changed? How many times have the borders of the United States changed? I mean, they changed in 1949 when Alaska became the 49th state. So, it's not great. I don't like it. I think there's going to be a lot of unhappiness with whatever the deal is with Russia. That's just a fact at this point. The president's dealing with a lot of bad options, but it's going to be better than all the killing. It's certainly not unprecedented in the history of the continent. And I think, as I said before, if we have a strong deterrent in place to prevent him from going back in, or God forbid, into a NATO member, then I think we can put this behind us and move on.
Stop the killing. I mean, that's the goal here. Bring some peace, stop the killing. And you're right. I think they got wound up in their own rhetoric. They can't get away from it now because they told their residents, their populace in those individual countries, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be strong as hell. It appears as though Mark Rutte, I think that's how he says it, it appears as though he wants Ukraine to be in NATO. Is he likely to get that? I mean, we just talked about it, I know. I don't think it's going to happen because that now puts NATO butted up against Russia. And as you said, very corrupt country. You got the Dancing with the Stars guy who's in the president's chair. He stopped civil rights. You can't have a freedom of the press, freedom of religion. They haven't had a vote since the war has been going on. But Rutte appears to be a guy who really wants that. Is he likely to get through to Trump or not?
I actually don't think that's the case.
Okay.
He's been Mark's been a good friend to Heritage. He's been to see us a couple of times as his predecessor came in as well when he's in DC. And his feeling is that Putin should not have a veto over who gets into NATO. I agree with that.
Yes,
it's none of his business. It's none of his business who's in NATO. So he can just go pound sand over that. At the same time, the Secretary General's been clear that Ukraine is in no position for doing this. I have no objection if they want to start what they call the mapping process to see if a country is acceptable for NATO. I think that could take 20 years if it takes a day. And so, it's in a way saying, we're not going to get them in tomorrow. Maybe we want to consider them down the road. Maybe we don't. But that's not a decision for Vladimir Putin. So I think that's a little bit more where the Secretary General's head is.
Gotcha. Last question for Victoria Coates. Thanks for the time and the access. How does this thing end? Is it going to be Putin sitting here, Trump, and then Zelenskyy sitting there, and they all sign the thing, they shake the hands, and then they pull their military out? How does this thing end, do you see?
Well, that'll be interesting. The president started talking about a potential ceasefire again today. It's not something he wanted to talk about on Friday, so maybe we could get to a ceasefire. See if that serves as a sort of test of goodwill and good faith. Okay. Then, I mean, if Putin is willing, I mean, they could be in Geneva next week. I mean, you could move on a dime. The group that was assembled today in the White House was historic. That should have happened in May of 2022. That's the kind of leadership that we've needed on this issue. And so what I think if there's a deal to be had that Zelenskyy thinks he can keep up his end of, I think this could happen very quickly. Now, if whichever side, Russia or Ukraine, decides they're going to dig in and they're not going to do it, then this could take more time, as the president said. But hopefully everyone realizes this is the end game, time to wrap it up. Nobody's getting anything out of this anymore. Way too many people have died. And so it's time to follow some U.S. leadership and get it done.
Vice President of the National Security and Foreign Policy over at Heritage Foundation. Go to heritage.org. Is Victoria Coates. Victoria, thanks a million. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Joe.
So all of the leaders of Europe are here. The EU, they're all here. Everybody's got an idea what's going to end this Russian invasion into Ukraine. And, after what we saw on Friday, a huge power play by President Trump, I wanted to get from somebody who is from Europe. Of course, we have Smythe Hill every single Monday. We love having you on, Kay. How are you, first of all?
I'm doing great. I spent the weekend down at Carolina Beach in
Okay.
North Carolina, where
Yes.
I thought I could escape the news. Turns out that even the old hippie that runs the bodega wants to talk about international politics.
Right.
And I was just like, let's go, dude.
Everybody's a
I'm
foreign
good.
relations expert. Everybody thinks they know what's going to. We can't give up any land to Russia. Okay, let's just keep killing people. We can't allow Ukraine to this, that, and the other. Okay, we'll just. And NATO says this, and the EU says that. As somebody who was a resident, who was born and raised in Wales, what do you know about what's going on as a child growing up? I mean, is it like hyper everything Europe? You know everything. Everybody thinks of America a certain way, or is it disconnected completely? I know that you are very good at disconnecting. I'm not. As an adult, you're good at that. But growing up, were you engulfed by it all the time in Europe?
Oh yeah, but I think that's also because I was an only child, and my dad both my parents are extremely well read. My mother's career was kind of dependent on understanding what was going on in the whole world, not just in Europe. And I was blessed to have parents that would talk to me about these things over the dinner table. And then as I got older, obviously this is probably why I did my degree. I did a very
Right.
broad spectrum degree: sociology, geography, mainly it's sciences, but geography at Plymouth University. And I think something really shifted, I would say, probably around like 2008. I lost my job that I'd had for years. We start work at like 13 in the UK, and it's great. I think everyone should get their first job when they're a
Yes.
teenager.
I was 12, to be honest. But go ahead.
Yeah, like I mean, like you do babysitting. My first like in an actual shop job, I worked in opticians. And 2008, I think, really hyper focused everyone on the instability of the system that we lived in, and then that kind of coincided with when you go through a massive societal shift like that, like all the shops you grew up with suddenly don't exist. All of this nostalgia that you loved has gone. You start looking out to the rest of the world and thinking, oh goodness, what other kinds of instability are there? And
Yeah,
now
right.
I'd had some firsthand experience of that. I was in South Africa less than 10 years after the end of apartheid. I was in China during the SARS epidemic. And then like a few
What
years
is wrong
later,
with
I
you?
was in,
No, don't
I
do that. What is
know.
wrong with you?
When
Stop it.
I was in, well, I came out to the States actually throughout the financial crisis, so got to see it over the course of about 5 years, how much that shifted and changed things.
Yeah.
And so most people in the UK, I would say, are relatively well connected to the rest of the world. I would say more so than a lot of Americans, most Americans that I know. Like it's very easy to just focus on America because
Yes.
you don't neighbor with anyone that's
It was
actually
so
going to
far
bother
away. Yeah.
you.
Right.
Yeah, apart from when we had that open border for like 4 or 5 years, that sucked. But I think most of the people I speak to, my friends, my family back in the UK, like friends I've known since I was like 2 years old, some of them were all still in touch. There is now, I sense, a shift in the sentiment. It used to be obviously like very pro-immigrant. It used to be very pro, almost like a one world order. Like they wouldn't call it that, but they're like, oh, we're all part of one big world. And I'm like, well, your empire's collapsing. Everything that built for the
Yes.
last like 2,000 years as an empire, well, not really 2,000 years, like 1,500 years, give or take, as an empire is disappearing.
It's all going away.
And
No, I saw somebody actually from
yeah,
Wales online recently, over the weekend, I think, who said, yeah, my country is nothing like it used to be. And I think of Wales being disconnected from all of that, and it's all really happening in London. I guess it's not. When
everywhere.
the people where you're from see Vladimir Putin get in a plane, having to come and sort of grovel to Trump in Alaska, and they have this 3-hour meeting to come out and do this news conference, and they give the speech, and the whole time he's going on about how this wouldn't happen if Trump was in office, and the last administration wouldn't talk to me. What does Europe want? What do your people where you're from want? Do they want us to keep on feeding Ukraine and letting them kill generations of men there? Do they want to see peace? Do they want to see it end? Russia's not just going to say, okay, we give up. When they saw, and again, you're not there, you're in North Carolina, I get it. But when they saw, if you had been in the UK, what do you assume the reaction would be to Putin going to Alaska to try to get something done with Trump?
Oh, people are absolutely horrified that Putin and Trump would meet because there's a general anti-Trump sentiment in the UK because the UK, as we've said many times on this show, most people there are pretty spineless. I thought it was really sweet, actually, at the top of the segment when you said the leaders in Europe. And I'm like, we haven't had leaders since Winston Churchill, dude.
I stand corrected.
Like,
Sorry. Yeah.
no, I thought that was very kind of you. That was very
That's what I
nice
do.
of you to say that. But no, like we haven't really had any like serious leadership since Winston Churchill. But I think there is such an anti-Trump sentiment that they don't understand that he is coming in as a negotiator to try and stop the mass slaughter of men on both sides. And here's the thing, and I get like a lot of Americans I know feel this way, that Putin shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. It's not his land, blah, blah, blah. When I remember when I think I was in Hong Kong when the second Malaysia Airlines flight was shot down. Everyone in Europe knew that it was Russians in Ukrainian territories. They were aiming, or this is like the conspiracy theory,
Right.
they were aiming for a Russian passenger jet, and they were going to use that. They were already lined up along the border. They were going to use that as an excuse to invade Ukraine then. And then I remember being at, I was staying away. So this was, obviously years ago now, but I remember when he did actually invade, when Putin did invade Ukraine. It was my dad's birthday. And I think the first thing my dad said on the phone was like, that crazy expletive actually did it.
Right.
We knew this was coming, and we knew that Ukraine didn't have the power to protect its own land. So there was only the option of like America, like, because Europe doesn't have any money, like all of Europe's money disappeared and went to like basically get concentrated in Germany in 2008. And obviously the sterling isn't worth anything these days.
Right.
But I think there is such a heightened level of ignorance where people think Putin shouldn't have done that, and it's not very nice, and he should give all that land back. And it's like, dude, that's not how war works.
Right.
And right now, as much as we all want to sit here and not believe it, like Putin's kind of winning because he won't back down. Because he has North Koreans basically going in there to kamikaze themselves to get that land out of Ukraine. And so Zelenskyy doesn't have a leg to stand on. Putin probably needs to calm down, but he's also backed by China, North Korea, and like the most unstable leaderships this world has to offer. All of the, like China has full control of Africa basically at this point. And so if all of these different powers want to completely destabilize Europe, I already think Putin's probably behind the mass migration of fundamentalist Islam into Europe, which is exactly what Stalin did with all of the Stan countries. He pumped them full of people.
Let me stop. You're telling me that Russia, because we know there's mass migration from illegal aliens from Northern Africa going into Europe and taking wholesale over entire cities. You cannot go to Milan at night. You probably shouldn't go there during the day because there's a lot of violence going on. There's a lot of influx of people who are not Western civilization people. They are not people that have any Judeo-Christian values whatsoever, and it's a bad thing for that part of Italy. I know about that. Our mutual friend Simona has been there and said, no, you don't want to go to Milan. So at the end of the day, you say Russia is behind that? Why? Why would Russia want to destabilize a continent half of its country is in?
Because then he gets to have it. I'm not saying that's like I put a light bet on it, but that's exactly what Stalin did with all of the Stan countries. It's sort of like one of the oldest trick in the book kind of ideas. You pump a country full of people that aren't from there. You basically split the demographic. You have them turn against each other. And then the proxy power, which would be China and Russia and that kind of nice little cabal over there, they can then come in and take full control of it through their proxy leadership. It's sort of like, like the US has done this by installing their own leaders in different countries. It's just never worked because America doesn't do it in that same kind of like brutalist sense. And I think that when you look at the sociology and the war games, like the psychology of these war games that play into the sociology of it, I don't know, that math makes sense to me. Like, why wouldn't Russia support that? It could potentially give him full control of the entirety of Europe. And to be honest with you, if China or the fundamentalist Islamic, because they are fundamentalists, like those who don't assimilate are pretty much fundamentalists,
right?
Or China want to come in and take full control of Europe right now, they would win that war because we don't have the military for it. Everyone out there is so awful to America that I really, I would pray that America would get involved. Like, it would be their only hope. But I think Putin has a lot more cards up his sleeve than Zelenskyy realizes,
Well,
and I just pray that Trump sees it.
Why would the U.S. get involved in helping Europe at all? It's not like it's World War II times. And here's what I mean. You can literally be arrested if you tweet the wrong thing. You can be arrested if you put something on Facebook. You can be arrested if you're silently praying inside of an abortion clinic and they assume you're praying that people don't get abortions. I mean, this is what's really happening in your old stomping grounds. So why would we even get involved when they're basically handing their countries over to these fundamentalists that you're talking about and allowing for wholesale cultural change? And you're right, for 1,500 years, they didn't take that garbage. Now, somehow you've got leadership in Europe, and I'm talking about the UK specifically, that is not only allowing this, you've got people who are running the joint, like in Scotland, going down the list of there are too many white people in positions of power in the government, and nobody says boo. So, I mean, I don't even know that we would step up, not under a Trump-like regime. You would not step up and say, let me help you out, Europe. No, he's going to say, you guys are ruining your own countries. Fix that. Maybe we'll think about it.
I think this is the sad thing. I don't think there are any leaders left in most of Europe. Like, Europe really needs to become America at this point. And the only reason I say that is because without Europe, that's Western civilization basically gone. Yeah, there's a lot of people that could argue that like Central and South America, like culturally, because of the Catholic Church, they're basically Western civilized states. And they kind of are. But they're also really smart in that they just mostly keep to themselves. Like, I've never been to Costa Rica, but I've seen pictures of it, and I completely understand why they don't get involved in stuff. They're just hanging out, doing their own thing. The biggest issue that they have to deal with is the cartels, and that is plenty for them. But if we lose Europe, it's just America. Canada doesn't count because they don't do anything. But it is just America left. And that is a small continent. Like, without Europe, America no longer needs to be a first world country, and that's kind of the terrifying thing, because everyone says like, oh, China needs America, like China doesn't need America. China would go and massacre like 2/3 of its population, and then or it would just relocate them across the rest of the world, because China's only goal in its existence is for everyone to be Han Chinese. And so it doesn't actually need America to achieve that ultimate goal. Like, even financially, it doesn't need us. And so I think we have to keep Europe, because if we don't keep Europe, we are completely on our own, isolated on this little continent. And like, I don't know, pretty much everyone I know, except for like a handful of my close friends who, like me, love a good dumpster dive. Most people are pretty dependent on being able to go to their high street shops. They want to go, order something on Amazon and get it tomorrow. They don't know how to go into their garden and find things to calm down their headaches and their ailments. They have to go straight to their doctor to get it. Like, we've lost so much of our survival-based knowledge. And I think that without Europe, we risk being so isolated that we could collapse in on ourselves like a dying star. I don't believe it, but it could go that far.
I want to finish on this note. And I hear you. China is tied to us. 35% of the entire world's economy comes from us. But I get it. You're right. They've done it before. They've killed tens of millions of their own people just to prove a point. Having said all of that, at what point do we stop defending Europe when after we defend them, after they rebuild, after they become prosperous again, they start electing a bunch of idiots again? How many parts of Great Britain right now, how many cities are run by fundamentalist Islamic people that came from somewhere else? A lot of them. I can't name them all off the top of my head. From London on down, they're just one by one taking over individual cities, individual townships, individual areas, individual provinces, whatever the hell you people call it over there. At some point, we're going to go, hey, we keep on defending you and saving you. Can you do something better next time? And it just doesn't seem to happen. So I just want to leave it there. That's my very American perspective. You're almost as American as I am at this point. But I love that you've got the perspective from there as well. I've got to shift gears and ask you this. What was it when you went to school in Wales that had to prove that you were physically fit? Did you guys have to go through a physical fitness test in the UK or not?
We do. We used to do, oh gosh, what was it called? It was like a buzzer test. We have to run back and forth.
The biggest
thing I did was, I think it's called a bleep test, I want to say. Not an expletive, like a bleep test. And you'd hear like the bleep and you would have to run. the biggest thing I did was not actually related to my school. It was the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which when I was probably like 12 when I started it. It's a series of hikes you do, and that sounds like super nice, clean, and easy. You carry everything you need for 2 to 5 days on your back as a young teenager. You're like Wales, where I grew up, is all mountains or hills, mountains, and valleys. So you're going up and down, up and down, up and down like this. There was one point where I had to cut the skin off the back of my heels because I'd gotten basically trench foot, and I carried on and still completed all of it. So there's little things like that you can do. I actually got into a pretty nasty fist fight in one of my phys ed classes. I was no longer allowed to take part in that class. I was moved to a music program. I think I got like a B in that. But you have to do that kind of stuff. I don't know if you have to do it anymore. But
well, we had to do it here. It's called the presidential fitness test, and it appears to have gone away. And everybody was like, no, you should all look like Lizzo. It was very crazy. Well, now we got this guy, heading the HHS. Now we got this guy doing. Now we got Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense, and there they are going through all this stuff. They're doing burpees, they're doing squat jumps, they're going to be doing pull-ups in a second here. Where I think RFK Jr. actually, I think Pete is kicking his legs here, which isn't fair. It's a kip, but either way, I mean, it's like, okay, I look at this and I'm like, I need to go. Actually, I've already gone to the gym today. I watched this and I'm thinking, wow, America's on the way back. That's a really good feeling, isn't it? That we're now highlighting that it's okay to be in shape, it's okay to have muscles. Okay to be a man, okay to be a woman. It's a sea change. I mean, that's kind of nice, isn't it?
It's not just okay, it's not just nice. I think it's essential to our survival. And I think it is one of the next best things that has come out of less than a year of Trump's leadership. Like, we're not even a year in, Joe. And this is exactly how we should be represented. Like those are two real men. You're a real man. That is how every single man in this country, that is what you should all be striving to be. Like, put down the cheeseburger, get to the gym. Yeah. I love it.
This guy's like 70. Well, not that guy, but I mean, this guy. It doesn't make any sense. Kay, you've got a new endeavor. Tell us about the new endeavor before we go.
Oh, yes. I've got some new writing work going on. I'm going to start working, or I just started working with a team called the Wandering Wolf Productions. So anyone who's a fan of ancient sites, ancient histories, ancient mysteries, Mike Collins, who runs Wandering Wolf, has been to, I think at this point, it might even be over 300 ancient sites around the world.
Give me the website. We got to go. Give me the website.
It's wanderingwolfproductions.com. You can find him on YouTube. Go check out all of his videos. They're great.
You're the best. We'll talk to you soon. That's Kay Hill, and we're back after this. Stay right here.